Alright y'all, it's time to finally answer the question. Did skilling up change my opinion about scav vaults? For those who don't know, a while back I made a video saying that scavenger vaults aren't fun because they aren't always winnable. Iskall disagreed and basically said it's just a skill issue. So I said, okay, I will get good and reevaluate. So I ran nothing but scavenger vaults from level 61 through 66, and then I collected data from there through level 76. I'll open the crates as we go. Here's the improvement process. I ran a few test vaults to get a baseline, and there definitely were some rough spots. I determined that my biggest problem was my old tools, which didn't have much reach, so I replaced those and tried again. As it turns out, hitting from an extra block away makes a lot of difference. Then I tried a few different builds. The worst performer was a melee build. Without any area damage abilities, it just wasn't fast enough. Ultimately, I settled on poison chaining with lots of speed and dash, and yes, poison chaining is the most satisfying way to dispatch mobs. So with that decided, I looked at my gear. As Iskall has noted, the equation here is simple. Minimize incoming damage and maximize outgoing damage. But the gear you roll almost never does that, so I spent loads of resources creating the best gear I could manage. The next several vaults were dedicated to improving my technique. Hunter is nice, but it can't see everything at once, so I started using treasure goggles, which are great for knowing which rooms to entirely skip. It was also very apparent that fighting mobs is just too slow, so I started relying on poison for all but the toughest mobs. I also started bypassing most of the tanks. By the end of that, I managed to complete 8 scavs in a row, and with an overall win rate over 70%, I was finally ready to start collecting data. And collect I did. I won't bore you with the details, but here's an overview. I ran 25 scav vaults from level 68 through level 76, and in each one, I stopped looting as soon as I got the required items. For the purpose of win-loss, I removed 2 of the vaults because I had been fiddling with config files and forgot to reset them. I removed 1 other because I stopped to collect chromatic iron. I also took out the 1 silly stream death because we're only looking at scav completion, not survival. Of the remaining 21, I completed 16 outright. I say outright because there were some edge cases. One of the vaults was multiplayer, and I got one of the items from the other player. Then in one vault, I got the final items from an Omega room at the very end, but I didn't have enough time to turn in the items. I'm counting the second one as a loss, but the first one as a win, since I still could have completed it in the time we took to meet up. Now for the analysis. There is some math involved here, but I've done all the work so that you don't have to. Of those 4 losses, 3 were definitely winnable. You just need to be about 10% faster than I was. The last loss was of particular interest though, because in most vaults, I'm down to 1 chest type needed within 10 minutes or less. But this time I didn't get my last pottery shard until I was under 4 minutes remaining. And I didn't get the last sack until after that. By the numbers, this objective was also one of the hardest. With 200 wooden chests in a vault, even 3 spider webbing spools would have a 96% completion chance. 12 pottery shards would only be 68%. The bigger thing though is that for 2 goblets, 25 gilded chests gives about a 50-50 chance of completion, and I only found 14 in the whole vault. Now, I reviewed the footage, and I am 100% sure I did not pass up any gilded chests. I also checked for dungeons, and there were none. This vault also happened to be in the minority in that I didn't get any challenge rooms or Omega rooms, even the ones I didn't need. For me, that is very unusual. Of course, you could argue that I'm just not fast enough with the wooden chests, although that doesn't negate the lack of gilded chests. And even if I had broken 200 gilded, there's still a nearly 4% chance that I won't get 3 earrings. Still, fair is fair, and plenty of folks do bring back several hundred chests in every vault. And this really was just the edgiest of edge cases. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I'm using a binomial distribution calculator to get the probabilities based on drop rates versus the number of chests, ores, and mobs. At this point, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the examples from the first video. These had 31 and 30 dwellers, but the second one had a purple essence drop rate of 16.7%, which is just over half the nominal rate. There's a less than 8% chance of getting a drop rate that low, so I definitely got unlucky there. But that's just how RNG works. With a large enough sample size, the rate evens out, but individual attempts vary quite a lot. That does mean that you are likely to eventually get a vault that raises an eyebrow. For example, I categorized this loss as winnable, but it is also an outlier. I don't know if this is just a void vault thing, but out of 425 mobs defeated, mostly by poison, only 18 were dwellers. That's about 4.2%, which is roughly half my average across all vaults. I was only 1 essence short though, so even a few more dwellers would likely have finished that one out. So now let's draw some conclusions. I think it's obvious that some vaults are harder than others for reasons outside your control. Why did I get so few gilded chests here? Why did I get half as many dwellers as usual here? And why did I get half as many essences per dweller here? But again, if I had been about 10% faster, my completion rate would be near perfect. So with all that done, have I changed my mind about scavs? Well, partially. You see, I was surprised enough at these results that I did some testing at lower levels. If you max out your damage and defense, you do get similar results at high and low levels for the mobs at those levels. The builds are very different though, because at level 20, when scavs are new, you have to pick and choose where you focus, and no matter what, you will sacrifice some of the speed, defense, or offense that you can optimize at higher levels. Obvious, right? But there is more. At lower levels, you tend to have fewer resources, and you level up much faster. That means it isn't worthwhile to invest in every piece because you'll likely only get a few uses out of each one. So most players won't have the perfect defense that I made for my test, or the near perfect offense. Lower level players are also less likely to have big backpacks, brews with the modifiers they want, crafted modifiers in your gear, choice of trinkets, all the little things that make vaults just a bit easier. Now that's not to say that all scav vaults are impossible at low level, but this is where the friction comes in. Imagine if every possible scav were somewhere on this scale. The green is easy, yellow is challenging, and red is overwhelming. As your mechanical skill increases, the red shrinks. As your gear gets better relative to your level, the red shrinks. And as your build gets better, the red shrinks. RNG can shift the scale either way. However, bad luck is soft capped by your skill, build, and gear. Your build is hard capped by your level though, and your gear is soft capped by how practical it is to spend the resources to make it good, which is indirectly limited by your level via your total playtime and number of vaults. As a result of all this, you can expect RNG to affect your results less as you level up, assuming you keep upgrading your gear and allocating your skill points. Relative difficulty of the scav also decreases as you level up. Sure, you don't need as many items at lower levels, but if you want a 90% chance of finding one Omega item, you still need 68 chests of that type, even at level 20, and you naturally get more chests per vault as you level up. And that leads us to the low-level practical test. I said earlier that max defense and offense are equivalent at high and low levels, and that did prove true in a level 20 vault with ideal gear. But even then, I couldn't find a crowd control ability that was effective with only a point or two. So when I switched to average gear, well, let's just say the difference is apparent. No surprise given the vast gulf between good enough gear and perfect gear. Y'all, there's no 10% better to fix this. It wasn't even close. So, based on all of this practicing, number crunching, and experimenting, overall I conclude that with rare exceptions, scavs are at least 90% determined by skill, build, and gear. And as you level up, that number will move very close to 100%. When your level is low and your gear and build aren't optimal though, the RNG has an outsized impact. So the problem that remains is that for many players, including me, the difficulty actually decreases as you level up, regardless of your mechanical skill. And most casual players will form their opinions well before build and gear overtake the RNG. On the other hand, it also means that the endgame is probably as fair as you can make it. So with that, now is a good time to address one of my commenters. Why didn't I try to get better before making a complaint? This is a fair question, and the answer lies in one of the other common comments that I saw. If you don't like that part of the game, you can avoid it. You see, I was winning the majority of scavs back when I decided I didn't like them. I stopped playing them entirely around level 50, I think. The only reason I commented on it at all was to address the assumption that it's always and only a skill issue. The funny thing about this whole discussion is that it's very hard to increase your mechanical skill without also leveling up, which makes it very hard to separate the effects of level versus your skill. I would love to hear from any high-skilled players who can consistently beat hard scavs at lower levels without cheating on gear. But if you want to know an easy way to beat every scav, everyone except Iskall, check out this video. Oh, and for that one guy who said I just wanted more loot, take a look at this. Thanks for watching.